All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. I want you to imagine a massive corporation. They're spending literally millions of dollars on this state-of-the-art digital fortress, right? Only for a massive data leak to happen, simply because someone emailed a confidential file to their personal iPad just so they could, work from the couch for a bit. It happens all the time. Well, today we're unpacking the deeply universal theme behind that exact scenario. We're looking at how individual good intentions often completely fail without the right structural support. And to truly wrap our heads around this, we're going to build a cognitive bridge between two wildly different source texts. On one hand, we've got an analytical report on corporate data security and dispute resolution. On the other, a literary analysis of a deeply poignant tale of rural poverty in India. I know, it sounds like an unlikely pairing, but stick with me because by the end of this explainer, you are going to see exactly how they tell the exact same story about human behavior and systemic design.
The absolute crucial point here is understanding this core concept: structural vulnerability. Basically, this is a gap where good intentions are just not enough to prevent a negative outcome, and that happens because of systemic flaws or just completely unmanaged environments. So today, we're exploring this exact vulnerability through two completely different lenses: the incredibly high-stakes world of B2B cybersecurity and a raw, real-world narrative of survival and poverty. Both of our sources reveal a hard truth: relying on people to just do the right thing is never, ever a substitute for a strong system. So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. Number 1, we'll look at the illusion of control. Number 2, ADR's hidden security gap. Number 3, a rural tale of survival. And number 4, solving structural vulnerabilities. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The illusion of control. Front-end security in ADR. Let's start by looking at alternative dispute resolution, or ADR for short. These are the institutions handling highly sensitive mediation and arbitration cases. Now, from an institutional perspective, the story they tell is incredibly reassuring. These organizations invest heavily in secure tech. When a case first comes in, the intake, the document exchange, the scheduling, all of that happens on strictly governed, policy-driven platforms. We are talking high-level encryption, strict access controls, incredibly detailed audit logs, the whole shebang. Organizations absolutely love building these massive digital fortresses because, well, it impresses regulators and insurers. It makes everyone involved feel invincible, and this front-end layer really is designed to demonstrate absolute diligence. The institution feels totally in control. But is that really the whole story?
Section 2, ADR's hidden security gap, when the case leaves the platform. Because here's the thing: the reality of a dispute resolution case goes way beyond what happens during intake. There is this stark, honestly massive contrast between the sterile, high-stakes, heavily audited tech world of the institutional front end and what actually happens next. The exact moment a case is handed off to the neutral, meaning the mediator or the arbitrator who actually does the substantive work, well, control is unintentionally lost. The workflow suddenly shifts to a totally fragmented backend. The neutral is out there operating outside the organization's direct control, using their own personal devices and software to manage highly confidential information.
And when we say fragmented backend, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, neutrals end up relying on a whole assortment of ad hoc tools. We're talking personal email accounts mixed right in with other work, downloading documents directly to local file storage on their personal laptops, consumer file sharing services like Dropbox, random note-taking apps, and everyday messaging tools. And hey, let's be totally honest with ourselves for a second. We've all occasionally emailed a sensitive document to our personal Gmail just so we could review it comfortably from the couch. It is incredibly normal human behavior, but in this context, it's exceptionally risky. Now, I want to be crystal clear based on our sources here. This is not about individual neutrals being careless. Honestly, most mediators take confidentiality very seriously. They try their absolute best to do the right thing. But the vulnerability is structural. Creating dozens of unique risk profiles, all with varying baselines of security, is just fundamentally unmanageable for the institution. Which leads us to ask this incredibly sobering question from a risk standpoint. If sensitive case data has left the controlled environment of the institution's system, can that organization still credibly say it understands, manages, and protects that data? According to our source material, the honest answer is a flat no. They have a massive data lifecycle blind spot. The truth is, the institution's confidentiality posture is truly only as strong as the least protected place its case data ends up.
Section 3, a rural tale of survival, good intentions in the face of poverty.
Okay, now we are pivoting our lens of structural vulnerability entirely away from corporate data and into a personal, deeply moving anecdote about a rural Indian family. Our second source analyzes a first-person narrative told by a volunteer field worker. One day, this narrator enters a remote village hut and discovers a family living in absolute extreme poverty. The scene he describes is stark. He notes there was almost nothing in the house. Literally just a cot, a few utensils, and only some rice as their ration. He finds a mother, 3 small girls, and a baby boy. And we learn the father has unexpectedly passed away. This family is quite literally living on the absolute precipice of survival. So, after arriving and observing their dire state, the narrator, who happens to be very hungry, humbly asks if he might share a meal. The mother hesitates at first, but then, in this truly profound act of hospitality, she cooks her only ration of plain rice and serves it to him. He eats gratefully and departs quietly with a traditional rural North Indian greeting of respect, saying Ram Ram. But importantly, the story doesn't just end there. In the final step of the narrative, the narrator returns to the broader village community and actively organizes aid and groceries so this family won't starve. This short, very quiet story actually reveals massive, real-world themes. We see the theme of extreme poverty, which our source text grounds in real-world UNICEF data showing the severe deprivations and malnutrition faced by rural children in India. We also see hospitality and sacrifice, completely embodied by this mother sharing her meager, life-sustaining rice. Think about it. That single bowl of plain rice becomes a massive symbol of altruism. She gave from the absolute limits of her resources just to help a stranger. But we have to ask ourselves, how exactly does this single, beautiful act of hospitality expose a much wider systemic issue? Well, this connects directly back to our core theme for today. The mother's individual generosity is incredible. Her good intentions are pure. But she and her children remain structurally vulnerable. Without a social safety net, without external organized aid like the narrator eventually sets up, her personal sacrifice just isn't enough to save her family from starvation. Relying on the isolated goodness of individuals, whether that's a mother rationing her last bit of rice or a mediator trying to secure files on a personal laptop, is a symptom of a missing system. Section 4. Solving structural vulnerabilities beyond good intentions. So how do we move beyond relying purely on good intentions in both technology and in humanity? The answer actually lies in behavioral economics, specifically a concept called nudge theory, popularized by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. The core principle is brilliantly simple. If you want people to behave a certain way, you have to make it easier for them to do the right thing. You can't just ask nicely, you can't just write another strict policy. You have to design the environment so that the correct, safest action is literally the default path of least resistance. We really have to move away from our structural failures, like trying to manage a web of fragmented personal tech with a PDS policy document, or leaving a grieving family to rely on a mother's last rations. These are systems basically just crossing their fingers and hoping for good intentions. Instead, we need structural solutions. In our story, the narrator didn't just thank the mother for the rice and walk away. He organized structural village aid and ongoing groceries. He built a mini safety net. For the ADR firm, the solution isn't demanding better passwords or sending angry emails. It's providing a single, fully integrated, secure platform that makes the neutral's daily work easier to do safely than unsafely. For organizations handling sensitive data, this requires a massive mindset shift. You actually have to treat the neutral's desk as part of the institution's own risk surface by providing a secure, purpose-built software environment for all of their tasks. The scheduling, the note-taking, the drafting, the personal computer becomes nothing more than a mere access device. A window, really. Nothing sensitive is stored locally anymore. Everything lives in a governed, backup-ready environment. You make world-class security the absolute easiest option for them to choose. We've definitely covered a lot of ground today, traveling from the highly governed servers of B2B dispute resolution firms all the way to a dusty hut in rural India. But I hope you see how the lesson here is completely universal. Good intentions, whether it's the desire to protect a client's deepest secret or the desire to feed a hungry stranger, are beautiful, but they are fragile. They need frameworks. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Where are the invisible structural gaps in your own community or your own organization? And more importantly, how are you going to build the systems needed to truly support those good intentions? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and keep building better systems.